You are watching Web of Faith 2.1 and a half, presented by Father John Trujillo and Father Kenneth Briganti. We are happy you will be joining us. And now, without further ado, Father Kenneth Briganti and Father John Trujillo.
Hello, my name is Father Kenneth Briganti. I'm the pastor of St. Mary Magdalene de Pazzi Parish here in Flemington, New Jersey, for those who are not parishioners but are joining us on YouTube. And I'd like to also introduce my colleague,
Father John Trujillo, Diocese of Harrisburg, and Director of Pastoral Formation at Mount St. Mary Seminary in Emmitsburg, Maryland.
And as, of course, if you're watching this, you know we're sort of quarantined. So we decided to do our Web of Faith Series 2.0, which you can see on EWTN every Saturday at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as a parish version. So we're calling it Web of Faith 2.1 and a half. And we welcome all of you out there. We hope you're all safe and you're at home and you're doing well. And certainly you've been in our daily prayers. And there are some questions that people have been writing into us, and we thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to take some time and to answer them. We'd like to thank our technician, Father Matthew Marinelli, who's putting this all together for us, and it's been very good and kind to spend some time to do this. He has to put the picture and the voice together, so the editing he's been learning how to do. So we really appreciate that, because this is a great evangelization tool. Since you can't come to us because of the quarantine, we're going to come to you. There you go. All right. Father, do you have any questions for me?
Yes, we have one right here, hot off the press.
Wow.
Father Briganti,
Yes.
If there were no priests or bishops left, I guess, in the world, could deacons or nuns say Mass? And that's from Fred.
No. Next question.
Why is it no?
Why it's no? Because sacred orders, as you know, there's a 3-tier sacred orders. Deacon, when you're ordained a deacon, is the first level or the lowest level. And what they are ordained for is to preach. They have the faculty to baptize, witness marriages. They can also participate in funerals, meaning at the burial time. They help the priest at the liturgy of the Eucharist in their role as deacon of the Word and deacon of the Eucharist, which means preparing the altar and getting it ready for the sacrifice. But that is the diaconate role. Above and beyond that comes the priesthood. Okay, now the priesthood, the priest shares in holy orders of the bishop. The bishop has the fullness, of course, and he then designates and delegates after ordination a priest in the parish to be his vicar, one who represents or acts in name of. Okay, that's why an associate pastor now is called a parochial vicar. But the pastor, too, acts in the name of the pastor. He is, of course, of the parish, the official liturgist, and he runs the sacramental program. He's the official teacher, preacher, but it's only because the bishop has given him the delegation to. So a priest then can offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass. In addition, can also hear confessions, and with delegation can also witness marriages, just like the deacon can with delegation as well. And also with delegation, because it's in his sacramental realm, that he can also confer confirmation. There are times, though, that a priest can do confirmation without that delegation in a case of emergency, and also in Holy Saturday at the rite of Christian initiation of adults when the pastor is receiving them into the Catholic faith. When he's doing adult confirmations outside of RCIA, he has to receive permission from the bishop. Now, the bishop has the fullness of holy orders. So besides the sacraments we just mentioned, he, in addition, is the only one that can ordain a deacon and ordain a man to the priesthood. And again, he shares the fullness. And so in his own diocese, he is the official teacher and preacher and the governance of the diocese and sacraments and liturgy. And as we mentioned earlier, he's the one that delegates. Now, nuns, on the other hand, or religious sisters, nuns are cloistered, okay? They're behind the grill, and religious sisters are in the active world, are not ordained at all, but rather they take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They live in community in different aspects, but they are not in the clerical state as the diaconate, priesthood, and episcopacy.
Yes, I know sometimes people get confused, Father Ken, because they think, well, a deacon, because he's clergy,
Right.
why can't he say Mass? And sometimes when there's a communion service outside of Mass and the deacon officiates, or he's able to do benediction, the problem is, not problem, but the clarification should be that the deacons are unable to consecrate the bread and wine into the body, blood, and divinity of Christ. Only the priest or the bishop can do that, because they have that special charism in holy orders of the priesthood, which obviously, as you just mentioned, the bishop has the fullness of. So deacons cannot, all right, but they can baptize, they can witness marriage, as you said. Sisters, nuns, the only sacrament they would be able to do is like a baptism in emergency, because any the faithful could do that.
And some of the religious sisters who ran hospitals were nurses, and they would do that, in the cases of emergency, have that permission.
Yes. And I should say at this point would be a good shout out, because your parishioner, David Keys, was ordained to the diaconate today.
Right.
So we should say, congratulations, Reverend Mr. David Keys.
And he's on his way to priesthood. Hopefully, God willing, June 20th will be ordination in our diocese to the priesthood. But very good question. Let's see. I think we have one here for you.
Okay.
Dear Father John, first of all, I enjoy your show on EWTN.
God bless
Thank you for you and Father Ken bringing this to us. I have a question. Can you go to a Society of St. Pius X for Holy Mass if there is no ordinary form, which is Novus Ordo, or extraordinary form available in the church?
Yes, I think we should first point out to our audience that the Society of St. Pius X, that's the religious group that Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre founded. He's now passed away.
Which is his anniversary, I think, was today or yesterday.
I think it was yesterday.
Yeah, his death.
He, after the Second Vatican Council, wanted to maintain celebrating what is now called the extraordinary form. Back then it was called the traditional Latin Mass. Or
Tridentine Mass.
Tridentine Mass. The usus Antiquior. But after, I think it was 1985, or no, 88. It was 1988.
Here we were ordained.
We were ordained that the Pontifical Commission of Ecclesia Dei was formed, and Pope John Paul the Great at that point established was then the Fraternity of St Peter, which were former members of the Pius X Society, who then, because Marcel Lefebvre illicitly consecrated 5 bishops. They were validly consecrated, but illicit. And so it's in canon law that if you ordain a bishop without papal mandate, there's an automatic excommunication for the bishop who does it and those who are ordained to the bishop. And so that they were excommunicated, and then the Fraternity of St. Peter was formed to be able to minister to people who had those spiritual needs. Now, the Pius X Society, although they're not in full communion canonically with the Roman Catholic Church, they do have valid sacraments, and Rome has decreed that if someone goes there because they're unable to get to either the ordinary form or extraordinary form that's under the jurisdiction of the local bishop, you can go to the Pius X Society Mass. It would be a valid Mass, and you could fulfill your Sunday obligation. You're just not asked and not allowed to join them as a parishioner, because then you'll be severing your ties with the legitimate parish, and that which is usually territorial. So if you go there, again, you'd be receiving the valid sacraments, and sometimes there's places where it's just not available, or God forbid they got Looney Tunes running around. But we want you to be in full communion with the church, which is through the apostolic succession of Peter, but also the other apostles. And
now, I have a question though. Maybe the viewers would have the same. What about marriages? Because marriages have to be delegated by the bishop.
Yes.
So would their marriages be valid, or?
their marriages would not be valid because they don't have jurisdiction. The validity of the marriage, because canonical form is that you have a man and a woman who get married with two witnesses, and then there has to be a priest or a deacon or bishop as official witness, or the bishop can dispense with the canonical form. They get married by a Protestant minister or a justice of the peace. But without that dispensation, a couple married by the Pius X Society would be in the same case as a priest who had no faculties. It would not be valid, and neither would their confessions, because a priest needs faculties. Now, the Holy See did extend faculties even to the Pius X Society during the Year of Mercy.
Right.
Because they want as many people to get to confession as possible.
And they still have that, I think.
And I think they still possess that, but marriage, no. And that's why you have to be very careful. You should contact the parish where you belong. You should be registered in a parish. You should support it, and you should have contact with that, so that even if you don't get married there, for instance, if one of your parishioners got married in another parish, they would need to contact you to get permission for them to get married somewhere else.
Right, and I guess in 1988 or shortly after that, when there was the illicit ordinations of in the Lefebvreites, that Pius X group was sometimes called that, the Fraternity of St Peter came about. Some of them were members of the Society of St Pius X, and when the formal break took place, started a community that was recognized by the Pope at the time, would be St. John Paul II, and they are in full function and full illicit and valid, and they do exclusively the extraordinary form of the Mass. So, and they're all over the country. So it'd be, and they're forming parishes that you can actually join with the permission of the diocese that these parishes are in. So the Fraternity of St. Peter, and also the Institute of Christ the King is another one that does exclusively the extraordinary
King,
form,
High Priest,
which often Cardinal Burke does.
He's one of their greatest supporters. And in addition to the Pius X Society, there's also this Pius V Society, which were guys who left the Pius X Society. So they're even further removed, they're even more ultra-traditional. But again, the Pius X is valid. But again, you should really be connected with the parish you are living in, because there's where the faculties will reside for marriage and some of the other aspects of church life.
And I'm sure this probably also would bring up, but what about the Orthodox Church? You have the Greek Catholics and the Orthodox.
That's a good thing.
Can a Catholic go to an Orthodox?
You can always go to their Divine Liturgy. You can even go fulfill your Sunday obligation.
Divine Liturgy would be the name of the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass.
They call it Divine Liturgy. So if you go ask for Mass, they're not going to answer you.
It's a Latin term, right?
But if you ask for Divine Liturgy, which is the same for the Byzantine and Eastern Catholics, you can go there anytime. They will not give you communion, though, unless you're in full communion with the Orthodox Church, whether it's Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox, and so forth. But you can go for your Sunday obligation, particularly if you're visiting somewhere in Eastern Europe, you're going to Greece, you're not going to find a Latin Rite church too easily. So you can go to the Orthodox Church for your Sunday obligation. They'll let you go, but you're not to receive communion there. Not because it is valid. They just are very...
They put the stipulation.
Yes, and we're sort of in the same boat, not as much with them, because we would extend it to a Russian or Greek Orthodox if they couldn't get to theirs. But they're very strict on that they say you must be in full communion with the Patriarch, either of Moscow or Constantinople.
But then again, you have those, as we mentioned, the Greek Catholics, so to speak, okay, that are in union with Rome. Some of them were never outside of the...
Like the Maronites never left.
They're always with Rome. And there is no Orthodox counterpart. Most of the other Orthodox counterpart, like Egyptian Coptics, there's an Egyptian Catholics,
Ukrainian
Orthodox, Ukrainian Catholics, Ruthenian Orthodox, Ruthenian Catholics, Russian Orthodox, Russian Catholics even.
Yes.
So they have their counterpart, Melkites as well, and so there are those because as Pope Paul VI said in the council, that the church has two lungs, west and east, And so he gave recognition to all of our Eastern brothers and sisters who suffered from being in union with Rome, from those who remained Orthodox for many, many centuries. So you should know that you can go there, receive communion, you fulfill your Sunday obligation. They might be on a different little bit of a liturgical time difference than ours in the Latin Rite, but nevertheless, you fulfill your Sunday obligation. And they pray for the Pope more than we do in their liturgy.
mention at least 4 or 5
Yes.
times, and they mention the Blessed Virgin Mary 15 times. So, again, if you're in a nearby Byzantine Catholic church, please stop in, visit, attend Divine Liturgy. The icons alone are worth the visit in a lot of those churches.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. Father Ken, can a Catholic go to an invalid wedding ceremony and or wedding reception? And that's from Flo.
Well, Flo, this is a very volatile question that you're answering because it has to do sometimes with family and close friends, and sometimes standing up for our faith and what we believe can cause a lot of derision. It can cause a lot of hurt feelings. But normally, no. If you are attending a Catholic, a baptized Catholic who's marrying outside of his or her religion without permission, okay, we call it dispensation if you're marrying a non-baptized, or permission to marrying a baptized Protestant. And without that, that marriage is invalid. So you're witnessing to an invalid marriage. That's very serious. It gets kind of hairy a little bit with parents of this because a parent wants to keep the door open, and so while they may not attend the wedding ceremony, some of them may feel under the obligation to go to the reception because it's their daughter or their son. That's where the pastoral side comes in. I would say outside of, mom and dad and brother and sister, that, even that's really taking it to the extreme because you're partying at an invalid marriage, right? So what's the party at? So the protocol probably would be, maybe to show up for a bit, to wish the couple well, meaning to have their marriage convalidated in the church, and probably not even bestow a gift, and then probably leave shortly after, only because it's your son or your daughter, and you do want to keep the door open on the one hand, but on the other hand, you don't want to give any credence to the invalid marriage.
Exactly, and this also extends to the same case where if it's more than just invalid, let's say, God forbid, you have an incident where you've got a son or daughter marrying same-sex, they're having a ceremony.
Yeah, that's the new thing.
If you're a parent, you're between a rock and a hard place. You don't want to, close the door completely on your son or daughter. However, you cannot give credence, or you cannot give
because your physical presence would be.
And just when families treat it as if it was normal, whether it's an invalid marriage because they're marrying outside the church or they're married of the same gender. The issue here is that this son or daughter of yours is flagrantly violating the laws of God, insulting the Lord God. At the same time, that's your beloved son or daughter. So by you giving a nice fat wedding reception, you're paying for it, you buying them a gift, you wearing the tuxedo and a nice dress and acting as if this was normal.
Taking pictures.
I would say if you feel you need to go under duress. I had a wedding once where the guy was a Southern Baptist, the groom. His mom and dad were there, but you knew they were not happy campers. They were polite, but the look on their face, they were not dressed up. I mean, they were dressed properly for church, but they were not in a tuxedo. They did not go to the reception. They conveyed to everyone present they were not happy. Now, from our standpoint, it was a completely valid marriage and wedding because everything was done properly. But in their mind, they saw they saw us as being part of a cult. And although we absolutely don't agree with that, I still respect the fact that, all right, they went, they made an appearance, but that was it. And everybody knew where they stood and why. If you don't go to something, you need to tell them why you're not going or why you're going to leave early, because you don't fully approve of this.
However, I would say in the case of same-sex marriage, I wouldn't even attend that.
No, I wouldn't go at all unless this was. The only case I thought of was one where I heard of. I didn't have anything to do with it directly, where it was their only son, and I said, well, I would not have gone myself, but if they said this, he said, if you don't go to this, they sat in the back. It was no church; it was some other type of ceremony, but. You have to talk this over with your spiritual director, your confessor.
Or pastor.
This is not something I would necessarily think you should do on your own, because you need to pray about this and look at all the ramifications. Because again, if you treat this as normal,
you're sending a message.
And you're a cooperator in evil.
Right.
If you say this is fine.
Right.
But if this, you have to look at it individually, but look at it objectively.
Instead of going, though, why don't you just send them a book of Catholicism for Dummies? And wrap it up and say, here.
And highlight that part.
And highlight that part. There's a whole section we deal with that.
Yes.
That might be a better route.
Very good.
All right. Dear Father John, what about Catholics who were unable to have a funeral during the pandemic that we are experiencing? With prayers, Josephine.
Well, the sad situation now of this pandemic is that priests, because of their bishops, have been forbidden to celebrate, but not only the bishops, but the governors and the mayors and that, to have a public funeral. And therefore, the burial is being done either by an undertaker or a priest or deacon from a distance. Now, normally speaking, a Catholic has a right and should expect to have a Catholic funeral. And sadly, I could say within my 16 years as a pastor, I saw a dramatic decline. More Catholics went to Mass every week, some even went every day. When their loved one passed away, you would say, Father, we don't want a Mass. I said, why? Well, we've got adult children who don't go anymore. We have friends and neighbors who are Catholic. And I would say to them, if you were of the Jewish faith and you died, guess what? Your friends would go to the temple or synagogue, even if they weren't Jewish, just to pray for you and to show support for your family. Non-Catholics are not averse to coming to the Catholic Church for a funeral. I've never had anybody express that to me, but I've seen Catholics overreact to the fact that their kids are non-practicing or their neighbors are not Catholic. So under normal circumstances, you should have a Catholic funeral as part of your Christian burial. But in this case, because you can't, especially like in Italy now, as Father Briganti mentioned the other day, you can have a Mass after the fact. You can have what we call a memorial Mass. A month after the death is also a nice traditional thing that's done in Italy and other parts of the world. But all the Masses that are said every day basically are for someone who's passed away, and it's not a particular, sometimes it's their birthday or just a day on the calendar. So when the Mass is celebrated, it's not as important as that it is celebrated. So obviously you want the Mass offered for the departed soul. The Christian burial is part of is still that they're being buried in consecrated earth. The prayers are said. But again, once this thing goes away, it would be nice to have the family not only have a memorial Mass, but then make a little trip to the cemetery. So many people don't go to the cemetery except the day of burial. And
right, and it's interesting to let you know at this point that if during the octave of All Souls, so beginning on November 2nd and then 9 days after, in that octave, or I should say a week after, 7 days after, that if you visit the cemetery every day, or even once, you can go once, but if you have an opportunity of going 7 times to receive what we call a plenary indulgence for a soul in purgatory. And with the usual requirements of communion and confession within 21 days of the spiritual act, praying for the Holy Father. You yourself have to be in the state of grace when doing this, which means not free from any original sin and attachment. Then you can apply that spiritual exercise of the visitation of the cemetery. Again, you could get 7 of them in that octave to the different souls in purgatory. It's a way that we, church militant, can help a soul in purgatory, as well as the saints can also help the souls. So never underestimate the beautiful things that praying for the dead can do. And I remember Sister Mary Angela, my 4th grade sister. She says, if you pray help a soul out of purgatory, you have a friend in heaven here on earth. that will be praying for you in heaven. So so there's always a little spiritual rewards there if we help out. Again, like Father mentioned, memorial masses are beautiful. Month bind in Europe, month to the date. Sometimes they have a mass, and a year to the date. The anniversary of the death is also very traditional of having masses said. Now we know in this country it's very hard to get masses because of the few priests. Some parishes though have openings all year round, but some don't. But it is all, if there is openings, it's nice to observe these anniversaries, and it's also a way of keeping your loved one and their fondness in your heart.
Good. All right, Father Ken, we got one for you. Father Ken, what is the green scapular? And that's from Blanche.
Well, Blanche, scapulars are a devotional item. It's called a scapular because it's usually two pieces of material on a string that goes over the scapular bone, okay? Now, the religious sisters, some of them wear, and brothers and priests, some of them wear what they call scapulars, like the Dominicans wear a scapular, the Carmelites wear a scapular, but theirs is a full-length piece of their habit
from
that
their
go
neck
over.
down to their toes.
Right. A lay person would wear something that would be underneath their clothes, and often would have a picture or an image of the devotional scapular that it is. Like the brown scapular, as we know, is devoted to Our Lady of Mount Carmel, given by St. Simon Stock, by Our Lady to St. Simon Stock, and it has beautiful spiritual gifts. You share in the prayers of the Carmelite sisters and priests throughout the world. And then there are other ones. The green scapular came about in the 19th century by a French nun in the Rue de Bac, which you probably would know by the miraculous medal, okay, because 10 years before that apparition of Our Lady, Our Lady visited another sister, St. Catherine Labouré, and having the miraculous medal constructed. Well, she visited this sister Justine in that same chapel 10 years later to have the green scapular made. And the green scapular is for praying for the sick, specifically. It's, again, the cloth is worn to promote spiritual devotion, especially for those who might have trials. Sometimes you go into the hospital and you see them on their bedposts because they cannot wear it because they might be going for surgery or what have you. But it's specifically for those who are ill, and the Daughters of Charity, even to this day, still promote devotion to the green scapular.
I remember when my brother was alive, he had muscular dystrophy, and one of the sisters who came to visit him, bring him communion, gave him that green scapular. He wore it every day of his life until he passed away, and it was very important for him, and it was a nice reminder, because the scapular is a sacramental as opposed to one of the 7 sacraments. So that means it was created by the church, not directly by Christ, but it works insofar as the spiritual condition of the person who's using it. If they use it in good faith, like the rosary, the scapular, the miraculous medal, these are all wonderful extensions of our faith, never to replace the sacraments, which are the direct source of grace, but these are indirect means by which you can grow in holiness.
And there are other scapulars too. There's the red scapular, which is devoted to the Passion. Another Daughter of Charity received that in another, not in Rue de Bac. There's the black scapular for Our Lady of Sorrows and the Servites. So, anyways, there's quite a few devotionals, but that also is in our Catholicism for Dummies book too, about more information about that. Well, this wraps up another episode, and it went by very quickly. And thank you for tuning in. And remember, as Mother Angelica says, to remember our parish, St. Mary Magdalene de Pazzi, between your electric and gas bill, because we are not receiving our normal weekly envelopes. So we need you to send those in if you use envelopes by mail. You can also go onto our website or Facebook, and you can sign up electronically, or also do it by text. Whatever way, please support your parish. We need the funds desperately.
And there's Mass on every morning.
Mass is at 8 o'clock every morning. Confessions at 9:30 to 10 and 4 to 4:30 daily on the weekdays. And adoration from 9 to 5 with benediction at 5 p.m. So the church is still very much open, and the priests and sisters are praying for you. Father, your blessing.
Absolutely.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Bye-bye.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Web of Faith 2.1 and a half. Please join us again at 5 p.m. tomorrow as Father Kenneth Briganti and Father John Trujillo answers more of your questions on all things Catholicism. Until then, God bless you and God love you.